All right, so today we're diving deep into Bernie Sanders' book, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism.
Oh, this'll be interesting.
It will be. We're going to try to figure out why he thinks Americans should be mad about the system and explore how we could create something more like what they have in Norway, you know, where you never get a hospital bill no matter how long you're in the hospital or what care you need.
That's quite a contrast to the U.S. system.
Yeah, a huge difference.
So, are we going to break down his main arguments?
We are. We'll look at the historical context he uses and what he thinks a fairer future might look like. It's for anyone who's maybe prepping for a debate on economic policy or just curious about different systems?
Or wants to understand where Sanders is coming from?
Exactly.
I'm ready to challenge some assumptions.
Me too.
So, where do we start?
Well, Sanders starts the book by talking about his 2020 presidential campaign and what it was like taking his message directly to people all across the country.
Makes sense. He was known for his massive rallies.
Right, but he also put a lot of emphasis on town hall meetings, particularly in rural areas. And it seems like those experiences really shaped his perspective.
It's interesting how he connects those personal experiences to his broader critique of the system. Like he talks about this young man at one of his rallies.
Oh yeah, what about him?
He told Sanders that he appreciated being treated like an intelligent human being.
That's nice, but it seems kind of basic.
It might seem like a small thing, but it really speaks to Sanders' approach. He respects people enough to engage with them on a deeper level, not just talk down to them.
That makes sense. And that's probably why his "not me, us" slogan resonated with so many people. It wasn't about him as a candidate. It was about building a movement.
A movement for change.
Exactly.
That slogan also reflects a deeper point Sanders makes throughout the book.
With that.
He argues that our current system is based on individualism and competition, which pits people against each other.
So what's the alternative?
He believes we need to shift towards a more collectivist approach.
Like working together.
Right, one that emphasizes cooperation and solidarity.
Interesting. But let's not get too far ahead. There's a lot more to unpack in this book. And it wasn't all smooth sailing for Sanders, even during the campaign. Remember he had a heart attack on the trail?
Oh, wow, yeah.
He's surprisingly candid about that experience in the book. He talks about the physical and emotional toll and how tough it was to decide whether to keep campaigning.
I can't imagine going through that in the public eye.
It's pretty incredible that he bounced back from that and still ran such a strong campaign. He even worked with the Biden campaign, after he endorsed Biden, to create those issue task forces.
Really? What were those about?
They got together to hammer out policy positions on key issues.
So did they accomplish anything?
They actually managed to create the most progressive platform in Democratic Party history, which is pretty big.
Wow, that is significant.
Yeah, and it shows the power of sticking with it, even when things get tough, and working together, even with people you might not agree with on everything.
So even if you don't reach all your goals right away, you can still make progress.
Exactly. You can shift the conversation, create the conditions for future progress. Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about the pandemic. Sanders sees it as a major turning point for America.
In what way?
Well, it really exposed the inequalities that were already there,
Oh, absolutely.
like how billionaires and essential workers fared during that time.
On one hand, you have billionaires getting richer, and on the other hand, you have essential workers risking their lives.
Often for low wages and little protection.
It's a stark contrast.
And to illustrate this point, he drops some pretty mind-blowing statistics.
Not quite.
He says that between March 2020 and October 2021, the total wealth of American billionaires increased by over $2 trillion.
That's insane.
It is a 70% increase.
It's important to remember that these aren't just numbers. We're talking about real people struggling to afford basic necessities. While a tiny elite amass unimaginable wealth,
And that's what Sanders wants us to see, the human cost of this inequality. Which brings us to one of his main arguments, the conflict between what he calls oligarchs and the working class.
oligarchs. That sounds a bit dramatic.
It does, but he's not mincing words here. He straight up says, the very existence of billionaires is a manifestation of a corrupt political system.
So what does he mean by oligarchs?
He's talking about a small group of people with so much wealth and power that they can influence our political system way more than they should.
So not just wealthy people, but people who use their wealth to gain power.
Exactly. And he gives some pretty vivid examples in the book, like Billionaires with multiple mansions, private jets, even spaceships.
While so many Americans can't afford health care or housing,
It's a pretty jarring contrast.
it makes you question what it means for a democracy when so much wealth and power are concentrated in the hands of so few.
Right. Does it undermine the idea of one person, one vote?
Does it create a system where the needs of the many are sacrificed for the benefit of the few?
Those are big questions, and they're questions that run throughout the entire book. But Sanders doesn't just critique the problem, he proposes solutions. One of his main focuses is taxation.
He wants to tax the rich.
He does, but it's not just about raising revenue. He sees it as a way to limit their power and create a more level playing field.
How so?
Well, he argues that the current tax system is rigged in favor of the wealthy, allowing them to avoid paying their fair share.
Like through loopholes?
Exactly. Loopholes that let corporations stash profits offshore and avoid taxes altogether.
Interesting.
And he uses Amazon as a prime example.
What about Amazon?
In 2018, despite record profits, they paid $0 in federal income taxes.
Really?
They even got a tax rebate check.
Wow.
So it's a pretty compelling argument, even if you don't agree with all his solutions.
It definitely challenges the idea that the system is fair for everyone.
Right. Sanders believes everyone should contribute their fair share.
To the systems we all rely on.
Exactly. He sees it as a matter of fairness and social responsibility.
Yeah.
Which brings us to another system that Sanders thinks needs a major overhaul. Healthcare.
Oh, he's a big proponent of Medicare for us.
All right. He is, and he argues that the current system is designed to enrich corporations, not actually provide care.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is, but he does make some compelling points. He highlights the fact that the U.S. spends twice as much per person on healthcare.
Than any other developed country.
Right, yet millions of Americans are uninsured and face huge medical bills.
It does make you question whether the system is working efficiently.
Or equitably.
Right.
And he contrasts that with systems like in Norway.
Where healthcare is essentially free.
Right, no matter how much care you need, you'll never get a hospital bill.
Can you imagine?
It's hard to even fathom.
It's a different model for sure.
Now, whether or not that kind of system would work in the U.S. is up for debate.
Yeah, there would be a lot of challenges.
But I think it's important to at least consider alternative models.
And think critically about how we can improve our own healthcare system.
Exactly. Now, Sanders sees Medicare for all as the way to achieve a more just and equitable system. He goes into detail about the benefits for individuals.
And for workers who wouldn't be tied to their jobs for healthcare.
Right, and even for healthcare providers who could focus on patient care instead of dealing with insurance companies.
It's a compelling vision.
It is,
Yeah.
but it also faces some major political and logistical hurdles.
The healthcare industry is incredibly powerful.
It's a classic David and Goliath situation.
But it sounds like Sanders is ready for the fight.
He is. He's calling for a fundamental shift in how we think about healthcare in this country.
A shift away from profits and towards people.
Exactly.
You know, this connects to a broader argument he makes about worker power.
Oh, yeah. That's a recurring theme throughout the book.
He believes that the decline of unions has played a major role in the erosion of worker rights and the rise of inequality.
He's very direct about this, he says. There is a class war going on in the United States. It's never discussed in our media.
He's saying that this silence benefits the powerful, allowing them to exploit workers without any real pushback.
Right, and he links this to healthcare
How so?
by pointing out that many workers are afraid to leave their jobs.
Because they might lose their health insurance.
Exactly, they're trapped in jobs they might not even like just to keep their healthcare.
That's a powerful point.
It shows how interconnected these issues really are.
So what does he propose?
Well, Sanders lays out a number of proposals for strengthening unions. Things like card check recognition, banning right-to-work laws, and raising the minimum wage.
So he sees unions as essential for protecting worker rights.
And for building a more just and equitable society overall.
Makes sense.
He believes that when workers have a voice, they can demand better wages, benefits, and working conditions.
Which ultimately benefits everyone.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of ground, but we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to discuss.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dig deeper into his vision for the future of work, the role of media, and his call for transformation of the Democratic Party.
Sounds good. I'm ready for more.
Me too.
You know, one of the most pressing issues we face today is the future of work, especially with automation coming on strong. And Sanders really gets into that. He's concerned that in a capitalist system, The benefits of automation might not be shared fairly.
Right. A lot of people are worried about AI and robots taking over jobs. What happens then? How do people provide for themselves and their families?
Yeah, he doesn't shy away from those questions at all. He suggests things like a federal jobs guarantee.
So everyone would be guaranteed a job.
Right, and he talks about worker representation on corporate boards and
Interesting.
investing heavily in retraining programs. Basically being proactive so the future of work benefits everyone, not just a select few.
It's about making sure nobody gets left behind.
Hmm.
But technology isn't the only force shaping our future. There's also the media. And Sanders criticizes how it's controlled by just a few corporations.
He argues that this limits the viewpoints we're exposed to, you know? It stifles debate on important issues.
Right. It's hard to have a real conversation when the platforms for that conversation are controlled by those who benefit from the problem.
Exactly.
Think about it. Just a handful of companies control the news, entertainment, even social media. It's hard to escape their influence.
And Sanders gives some pretty striking examples of how this plays out in real life. He talks about how media conglomerates, often owned by Wall Street firms, prioritize profit over the public interest. They shape the narrative to fit their bottom line.
So it raises concerns about whether we're getting accurate information, which is essential for a functioning democracy.
Exactly.
So what does he propose?
Well, some pretty bold ideas. Breaking up media monopolies, increasing funding for public and community media, even creating a new deal for journalism to support independent reporting.
Wow, so basically rebuilding the media from the ground up.
Essentially, yeah, he's advocating for a media ecosystem that's more democratic and accountable, responsive to the needs of people, not corporations.
A media that serves the public good.
Right, that's the idea.
It's a big shift in how we think about the role of media in society.
Hmm.
But let's shift gears again and look at his take on the Democratic Party.
Oh, this should be interesting.
He argues it needs a major overhaul to reconnect with working people and become a true force for change.
I've heard he's pretty critical of the Democratic establishment.
He is. He sees too many Democrats as beholden to corporate interests. They fail to truly fight for working families.
He doesn't think they're progressive enough.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
He even tells this story about a legislative candidate who mentioned he was a Democrat, and someone told him to get out of here.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it shows the disconnect between the party and the people it claims to represent.
So what does he want to see?
He wants the Democratic Party to stop chasing corporate donations and start organizing year-round, championing progressive policies, fighting for economic, social, and racial justice.
A party truly rooted in the needs of the people.
Exactly.
But that's a tall order.
It is. It's about changing the political system itself. And this is where the book gets really interesting. Because he doesn't just criticize, he offers concrete solutions.
Yeah.
For everything from campaign finance reform to creating a federal jobs guarantee.
So he gets specific.
Oh yeah, very specific.
Yeah.
For example, he wants to overturn the Citizens United Supreme Court decision.
The one that allows corporations to spend unlimited money on elections.
That's the one. He sees it as a direct attack on democracy.
Because it allows the wealthy to drown out the voices of ordinary citizens.
Exactly. It's about making sure everyone has an equal say in our democracy.
Which ties into his push for expanding voting rights.
Right, making it easier for everyone to participate.
He sees that as essential for a healthy democracy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He also talks about criminal justice reform.
Addressing mass incarceration, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and ending the war on drugs, which he sees as a failed policy.
Interesting.
He also advocates for tuition-free public college and canceling student debt.
He views education as a right, not a privilege.
Exactly. Investing in education is investing in the future. And let's not forget climate change.
Oh, that's a big one.
He's a big proponent of the Green New Deal.
So, immediate action to address the climate crisis.
Right. He proposes a plan for transitioning to 100% renewable energy.
Creating millions of jobs in the process.
He sees it as both an environmental and economic imperative.
Yeah, you can't talk about economic justice without addressing climate change. And you can't talk about climate change without considering its impact on vulnerable communities.
It's all interconnected. Sanders is advocating for a holistic approach, recognizing that these issues are intertwined.
And requires systemic solutions.
Exactly.
And he's very clear about who he thinks should lead this fight. The working class. He sees them as the engine of progressive change.
With the power to transform our society.
If they are organized and mobilized,
He calls for a political revolution.
a movement of the people to challenge the power of the billionaire class.
And reclaim our democracy.
It's a call to action for everyone who believes in a more just and equitable future.
It's about coming together, demanding a government that works for everyone, and building a society that puts people and the planet first.
What I find compelling about his writing is his optimism. Despite the problems, he truly believes we can create a better world. And he inspires readers to believe it too.
He's not just pointing out the problems, he's offering solutions and encouraging action.
It's a reminder that change doesn't happen on its own. It happens when people demand it.
He draws inspiration from historical examples of movements that achieved social change.
Like the civil rights movement, the labor movement.
He's saying we can learn from those victories and apply them to our current struggles.
His book is a powerful reminder that even when things seem impossible, change is possible.
It's about having the courage to imagine a better world and the tenacity to fight for it.
Even when the odds are stacked against you.
Sanders believes this is a fight worth having.
The stakes are high.
The future of our democracy, our economy, our planet.
It's all on the line.
He doesn't sugarcoat the challenges, but he refuses to give up hope.
He wants us to embrace our anger, channel it into action.
Become part of the solution.
And he gives concrete steps for how to do that.
Join unions, get involved in politics, support progressive candidates.
It's a collective effort.
A movement built from the ground up.
By people who are willing to stand up and fight for a better future.
It's about taking back our power, demanding a government that's accountable to its people.
And building a society that prioritizes people and the planet.
It's a vision that resonates with a lot of people.
Especially those who feel disillusioned with politics.
And disconnected from the systems that govern their lives.
Sanders reminds us that we're not powerless.
We have the power to vote, to organize, to speak out.
To demand change.
And when we come together, we can achieve incredible things.
He challenges us to think critically about the information we consume.
Be skeptical of corporate media, seek out alternative sources.
Become informed and engaged citizens.
He even offers advice for having those tough conversations with friends and family.
The ones who might not share our views.
It's about building bridges, finding common ground, focusing on shared values.
Moving beyond the division and polarization that plague our politics.
Working together towards a better future.
This message feels especially urgent right now.
With so much at stake, it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
It's that Sanders reminds us that hope is possible, even in dark times.
And that hope is fueled by action.
By the collective efforts of people who refuse to accept the status quo.
And are willing to fight for a better world. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Sanders leaves us with a powerful question. What role will you play in shaping the future of work, healthcare, and democracy in America? So we've talked about the problems, the solutions, the big picture stuff. But there's this other layer in the book where Sanders really gets into how corporate power, like unchecked corporate power, messes with our values.
How so?
Like what we think is important as a society. He uses this example of how we tend to value a star athlete, making a billionaire team owner even richer. More than we value, say, 1,000 teachers helping kids escape poverty.
Oh, wow. That's a really interesting point.
It makes you question our priorities.
It does, yeah.
Sanders is pushing us to examine how we define worth in this system, where it's often all about profit.
Like what's truly valuable?
Exactly. And he challenges the narratives that prop up that system. For instance, the whole idea that billionaires are job creators.
Okay, that's a common argument.
He says that narrative ignores the contributions of workers and the role of government in creating a thriving economy.
He's saying it's more complex than just billionaires creating jobs.
Way more complex.
Yeah.
He points out that a lot of billionaires inherited their wealth or built their fortunes by exploiting workers and dodging taxes.
That's a different perspective.
He's not afraid to call out what he sees as hypocrisy,
In a system that claims to be based on meritocracy.
but rewards greed and exploitation.
Yeah. Right. It's not a level playing field for everyone.
Not at all. And he critiques how corporate media often reinforces these narratives. They simplify complex issues in a way that benefits the powerful.
So we're not getting the full story?
Often not, no. He talks about how the media focuses on the horse race of politics, obsessing over polls and personalities instead of the actual issues.
So it's more about entertainment than substance?
It can feel that way sometimes, like they're treating politics as a game.
Instead of something that affects people's lives?
Exactly. And this leads into his call for a media revolution to break free from corporate control and create a more democratic media.
So what would that look like?
Well, he talks about supporting independent media outlets, strengthening public broadcasting, breaking up those big media monopolies.
So giving people more diverse sources of information.
Right. And it's not just about changing the structures. He also emphasizes media literacy, you know?
Being able to think critically about the information you're consuming.
Exactly. Being aware of biases and agendas.
So we can evaluate information for ourselves.
And demand more from our media.
Expect them to serve the public good.
Exactly. Now, all of this connects to one of his most thought-provoking arguments: the need for a fundamental change in the Democratic Party.
Oh, here we go.
He's pretty blunt about this. He says the Democratic Party has become too cozy with corporations.
And lost touch with working people.
That's the gist of it, yeah. He criticizes their reliance on big donations from wealthy individuals and corporations, and their tendency to favor small, incremental changes.
Instead of big, bold reforms.
Right, the kind of reforms that could actually address the root causes of inequality.
So he wants to shake things up.
He does. He wants a party that truly champions working families, that challenges corporate power head-on, and fights for economic, social, and racial justice.
A party that's actually progressive.
Exactly.
It's a challenge to the Democratic Party to live up to its ideals.
It is, and it's a reminder to all of us that we have a role to play in shaping our democracy. So, taking a step back, Sanders' book is a powerful critique of how things are, and a call to action for anyone who wants a more just and equitable future.
It's a reminder that we're not powerless. We can create a better world.
But it takes work. We have to be engaged and active in the fight for a better society.
It's a message of hope and resilience.
And the power of collective action.
It's a valuable contribution to the conversation we need to be having.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into Bernie Sanders. It's okay to be angry about capitalism. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking.
We encourage you to continue the conversation. Share your thoughts with us on social media.
Tell us what resonated with you. Do you agree with Sanders' take on capitalism? Let's keep this dialogue going.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.